the person you're looking at wasn't a police officer. They weren't responding to an emergency. And they weren't supposed to be inside this church. For nearly 30 minutes, this figure wandered the empty halls, opening doors, peering into classrooms, and waiting. Less than an hour later, a beloved fitness instructor would walk through those same doors. She never made it home. More than 10 years later, investigators still don't know who this person is, or why they killed Missy Bevers. But what makes this case so disturbing isn't just the murder. It's the surveillance footage. Because somewhere in those haunting minutes, the killer may have unknowingly revealed the truth. If you enjoy carefully researched crime documentaries that separate facts from speculation, consider subscribing to Very Dark Cases. New cases are uploaded every week. Now, let's go back to the beginning. On April 18, 2016, the city of Midlothian, Texas, was just beginning to wake up. It had the kind of reputation many people dream about: quiet neighborhoods, friendly faces, and a community where people looked out for one another. Nothing about that Monday morning suggested it would become one of the most baffling murder investigations in modern American true crime. At the center of the story was Missy Bevers. She was 45 years old, a wife, a mother of 3 daughters, and someone known throughout her community for her energy and encouragement. Friends described her as outgoing and compassionate. But perhaps she was best known for something else: helping people change their lives. Missy worked as a fitness instructor for Camp Gladiator, an outdoor fitness program that had become increasingly popular across Texas. Her classes often began before sunrise. While most people were still asleep, Missy was already preparing workouts, setting up equipment, and motivating others to start their day. Those early morning sessions weren't just exercise classes. For many participants, they were a community. And on the morning of April 18th, one of those classes was scheduled to begin inside Creekside Church of Christ. Because storms were moving through the area overnight, the workout had been moved indoors. It seemed like a simple decision. No one could have imagined how important it would become. Heavy rain had been falling throughout the night. Thunder echoed across Midlothian as strong winds swept through the town. Even before dawn, the roads were wet and visibility was poor. But Missy had taught classes in difficult weather before. Canceling wasn't in her nature. Around 4 a.m., she left home, loaded her workout equipment into her vehicle, and drove toward the church. Members of her class would begin arriving around 5 a.m. She planned to be there first. She had no reason to believe someone else already was. As Missy drove toward Creekside Church, a security camera inside the building had already begun recording something unusual. A figure dressed in what appeared to be police-style tactical gear was slowly walking through the empty church. They weren't rushing. They weren't hiding from the cameras. Instead, they seemed almost comfortable. Opening doors. Looking into rooms. Walking from hallway to hallway. At first glance, it almost looked like someone performing a routine security check. But investigators would soon discover something unsettling. There was no reason for anyone dressed like that to be inside the church. And no police agency reported an officer conducting business there that morning. The person on camera remains unidentified to this day. Just minutes after this footage was recorded, Missy Bevers arrived. Within moments, she would come face to face with the only known person inside the church. What happened next transformed an ordinary Monday morning into one of America's most chilling unsolved murder cases. And the surveillance footage investigators recovered would leave behind far more questions than answers. Before we continue, if you enjoy carefully researched crime documentaries that separate facts from speculation, consider subscribing to Very Dark Cases. Every week, we explore some of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in America. Now, let's examine the evidence that changed this investigation forever. As detectives reviewed the church's surveillance system, they realized they weren't just looking at the scene of a crime. They were watching the movements of the only known person inside the church before Missy arrived. The footage began well before dawn. It showed an individual dressed in what appeared to be police-style tactical gear. A helmet, heavy boots, protective clothing, gloves. To anyone seeing the video for the first time, it looked like a law enforcement officer. But investigators quickly confirmed something important. No police officer had been assigned to patrol or search the church that morning. The person in the video was an imposter. What happened next only deepened the mystery. Instead of moving with urgency, the individual wandered through the building at an almost casual pace. They opened doors, looked into classrooms, walked through hallways, occasionally stopping for a moment, as though searching for something. Or perhaps waiting. Investigators carefully studied every second of the footage. One detail stood out. The individual never appeared to steal anything. There was no obvious attempt to remove valuables from the church. No electronics. No money. No equipment. Nothing that clearly suggested burglary was the primary goal. If robbery wasn't the motive, then why were they there? As investigators synchronized the surveillance footage with the morning's timeline, the sequence became increasingly unsettling. Missy was scheduled to begin her Camp Gladiator class shortly after arriving at the church. Participants would start showing up not long afterward. That meant whoever was inside the building had only a limited amount of time before other people arrived. Was the suspect aware of her schedule? Or was it a coincidence that Missy entered while they were still inside? Investigators have never publicly answered that question. One of the most discussed details in the surveillance footage wasn't the clothing. It was the way the individual walked. Many viewers noticed what appeared to be an unusual gait. Some believed the person had an injured leg. Others suggested the movement could have been caused by the heavy tactical boots or equipment. Investigators have never publicly confirmed that the walking style represented an injury. Even so, the distinctive gait became one of the most recognizable features of the case. To this day, people continue comparing it with videos of potential suspects. While detectives examined the surveillance footage, another piece of the puzzle emerged outside the church. Missy's pickup truck remained in the parking lot. Inside the church, investigators discovered she had been attacked shortly after arriving. Exactly where the encounter began, and exactly how it unfolded, has never been fully released to the public. That decision was intentional. Law enforcement often withholds certain details in active investigations to protect information known only to the perpetrator. As daylight broke over Midlothian, the quiet community quickly filled with police vehicles. Crime scene investigators photographed every hallway, collected every possible piece of evidence, and searched for fingerprints, DNA, and anything that might identify the person captured on camera. The surveillance footage gave detectives something many murder investigations never have: a clear video of someone who could be connected to the crime. But it also created an enormous challenge. The person's face was completely concealed. No badge number. No visible name. No obvious identifying features. Only a silent figure, walking through empty hallways, as if they had all the time in the world. Days passed. Then weeks. The surveillance video was released to the public. Investigators hoped someone would recognize the clothing, the movements, or even the distinctive way the person walked. Thousands watched. Thousands offered opinions. Thousands called with tips. But identifying the person proved far more difficult than anyone expected. Because despite one of the clearest surveillance videos in an unsolved murder, the identity of the individual remains unknown. Before we continue to part 3, I'd like to hear your thoughts. If you had seen this surveillance footage before knowing what happened, what would have stood out to you the most? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments, and if you're enjoying this documentary, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Very Dark Cases. Because in part 3, the investigation takes an unexpected turn. Detectives begin examining vehicles, possible suspects, and a clue outside the church that continues to generate discussion years later. Within hours of the murder, Creekside Church had become one of the most heavily examined crime scenes in Midlothian. Investigators photographed every hallway, every doorway, every broken window, and every possible piece of evidence. But despite the amount of surveillance footage available, one thing was missing: a clear identity. The person inside the church had carefully concealed almost every recognizable feature. Their face was hidden. Their hands were covered. Their clothing concealed their body shape. Even determining whether the suspect was male or female proved far more difficult than many expected. As detectives expanded the investigation, they searched for something beyond the church walls. Someone may have seen a vehicle. A stranger. Anything unusual during the early hours of April 18th. Then, a possible lead emerged. Investigators became interested in a light-colored vehicle seen driving through the area during the early morning hours. The vehicle was captured on nearby surveillance footage. Police asked the public for help identifying it. Could the driver have witnessed something important? Or could they have been connected to the killer? Authorities never publicly confirmed either possibility. Meanwhile, experts continued studying the church surveillance footage frame by frame. Not just the suspect's clothing, but every movement. One detail refused to disappear from the conversation: the walk. The figure appeared to move with an unusual gait. Some observers believed the person had an injured leg or foot. Others suggested the heavy tactical boots, or even the equipment being worn, could explain the movement. Investigators have never publicly stated that the gait identified the suspect or proved any injury. Even so, it became one of the most recognizable features of the case. Sometimes, the smallest detail becomes the one everyone remembers. As the investigation grew, so did public speculation. Social media quickly filled with theories. People analyzed the surveillance footage, compared photographs, examined body language, and attempted to identify the person inside the church. But investigators urged caution. Speculation, no matter how convincing, is not evidence. Their focus remained on facts that could be verified. Detectives also examined Missy's personal life. Whenever a homicide investigation begins, police routinely explore every possibility. Family, friends, co-workers, professional relationships, financial records, recent communications. It's a standard investigative process. It doesn't imply guilt. It simply helps investigators determine whether any connection exists between the victim and the crime. Over time, numerous theories surfaced online. Some gained widespread attention. Others quietly disappeared. But after years of investigation, no one has been charged with Missy's murder. Despite countless hours of investigative work, the surveillance footage continued to present the same haunting reality. The suspect had been recorded. Their movements had been preserved. Their clothing was visible. Yet somehow, their identity remained hidden. It's an unsettling contradiction. One of the clearest videos ever released in an unsolved murder still hasn't revealed who was behind the disguise. And perhaps that's what makes this case so unforgettable. Usually, surveillance footage answers questions. This footage created even more. Every frame became another puzzle. Every movement inspired another theory. And every year that passed made the mystery even more difficult to solve. Before we continue, I'd like to step away from the investigation for just a moment. Over the past few months, someone has quietly listened to every documentary I've narrated. My wife. She told me these stories have become part of her evenings. And after watching a few of them, she smiled and said, "I think I'd love to tell one of these stories." The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. Some stories deserve more than one voice. So beginning with part 4. She'll be joining me to bring this investigation to its conclusion. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. I think it's going to be something special. So, I'll let her take it from here.
Thank you, Christopher. And thank you to everyone who stayed with us until this final chapter. Now, let's look at why, after all these years, Missy Bevers' killer still hasn't been identified. By the time the sun rose over Midlothian that Monday morning, the church had already become the center of one of Texas' most puzzling murder investigations. Detectives had surveillance footage, a detailed timeline, a crime scene, and countless hours of investigative work. Yet one thing continued to elude them: the identity of the person captured on camera. For many investigators, that remains the most frustrating part of this case. Usually, when police release surveillance footage this clear, someone recognizes a face, a voice, a distinctive feature. But in this case, the disguise concealed almost everything. The helmet, the bulky clothing, the gloves. Every detail appeared to reduce the chances of identification. It was as though the person had carefully planned to leave behind as little as possible. Over the years, the investigation continued. Detectives reviewed evidence again and again. They followed new tips, re-interviewed witnesses, and used advances in forensic technology to re-examine parts of the case. But despite those efforts, no arrest has been made. The case remains officially unsolved. Naturally, as the years passed, public discussion grew. Countless theories appeared online. Some believed the disguise suggested careful planning. Others focused on the unusual movements seen in the surveillance footage. Still others wondered whether the killer had a personal connection to Missy. Investigators have examined numerous leads throughout the years, but law enforcement has never publicly confirmed a suspect responsible for the crime. That's an important distinction. In cases like this, rumors often travel much faster than evidence. And here on Very Dark Cases, we follow the evidence, not the rumors. Perhaps the most haunting part of this investigation isn't the surveillance footage itself. It's what happened after it was released. Millions of people have watched those videos. They've paused every frame, studied every movement, compared countless photographs. And yet, the person inside that church remains unidentified. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most important clue isn't enough on its own. Missy Bevers was more than the victim of an unsolved crime. She was a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend, a woman who woke up before sunrise to encourage others to become healthier and stronger. The people who knew her don't remember her because of the mystery. They remember her because of the life she lived. And that's perhaps the most important thing any true crime documentary should preserve. Not just the unanswered questions, but the memory of the person at the center of them. Today, the investigation remains open. Law enforcement continues to encourage anyone with credible information to come forward. Even years later, cases once considered impossible have been solved because someone finally spoke. A forgotten memory, a conversation, a single detail that once seemed insignificant. Perhaps the same could happen here. Perhaps someone, somewhere, still knows exactly what happened inside Creekside Church before dawn on April 18, 2016. Until then, The surveillance footage continues to ask the same silent question. Who was the person walking those hallways? And why were they waiting? Before we end, I'd like to ask you one final question. What piece of evidence do you think investigators should revisit today? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you enjoy carefully researched crime documentaries that separate facts from speculation, please consider subscribing to Very Dark Cases. Because every case we cover represents a family still waiting for answers. Some mysteries fade with time. Others become even more difficult to understand. The murder of Missy Bevers belongs to the second kind. A quiet church. A stormy morning. A person hidden behind a disguise. And a mystery that has refused to surrender its answers. Perhaps one day, someone will recognize the person on that surveillance footage. Perhaps one forgotten detail will finally unlock the truth. Until then, Missy Bevers' story remains one of America's most haunting unsolved murder cases.